It's strange how quickly the things you think will never happen can become the things you most fear. I always thought for some reason that my holiday dinners would be filled with laughter, a warm sense of love, and the kind of cheer you see in the Christmas movies. But that all changed last year, at my husband's family holiday dinner. It was supposed to be a joyful occasion, an evening of tradition, togetherness, and for the first time in my life, being accepted fully into a family that had never really been mine. Instead, it turned into the night I would never forget. You see, I've always struggled with my in-laws. I get along with most of them well enough, but there's a certain coldness to the family dynamic that's impossible to ignore. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm oversensitive, but I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. My husband Ben comes from a large, tight-knit family, one of those families where everyone is connected by a kind of bond that feels unbreakable. They have their traditions, their inside jokes, their shared memories, and I was always the odd one out. I had to prove myself over and over again like I was auditioning for a part in a play, hoping one day they'd say, "You're one of us now." The holiday dinner had always been a big deal for Ben's family. Every year they gathered at his parents' house, a sprawling old Victorian on a hill that always felt like it belonged in the pages of a novel. The dining room was grand, with high ceilings and a large polished wood table that could seat 20 comfortably. His mother, Susan, would spend days preparing an elaborate spread roast turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, vegetables that had been cooked just right, and of course the pie. The house would be decked out with Christmas decorations, lights twinkling, a fire crackling in the background, and the smell of holiday spices filling the air. It was supposed to be magical, a place of warmth and celebration, but for me, it was more like walking into a lion's den. I had always been a little uncomfortable with the way Ben's family looked at me. Ben is the golden child, the one they all dote on. I knew that. Everyone loved him, from his charismatic father, Greg, to his younger sister, Emily, who was like the sweet, quiet one you couldn't help but adore. I was proud of Ben, but I couldn't help but notice how the family's attention always gravitated toward him. I suppose it was natural. He's the one who had done everything right, graduated top of his class, got a good job, climbed the career ladder. I, on the other hand, was different. I didn't have the same polished background as Ben. I hadn't come from money, I didn't have the same kind of formal education, and my career path had been a little more, well, unconventional. I worked hard, don't get me wrong, but I never seemed to fit into their mold. I wasn't one of them, and deep down, I always knew it. But despite my insecurities, I tried. I did my best. I smiled through awkward conversations, sat through uncomfortable silences, and made polite conversation with his aunts and uncles. I laughed at the jokes I didn't understand, complimented the food I couldn't appreciate, and tried to convince myself that things would eventually fall into place. After all, I had Ben. I had his love, and surely that was enough to bridge the gap between me and his family, right? That's what I told myself every year. This year, though, things were different. Ben had been more insistent than usual that I would fit in this time. His encouragement was meant to comfort me, but it felt more like pressure. I wasn't sure what had changed, but something in the air that holiday season felt tense, like something big was coming, something that none of us could see but that we all knew was inevitable. The evening started out like any other. The house was full of holiday cheer, people bustling around, laughter echoing, children running around in their pajamas. I smiled, trying to ignore the way my heart pounded in my chest, trying to ignore the feeling of being on display. We sat down for dinner and I was doing my best to engage in conversation, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I wasn't really part of the group. My small talk felt forced, my jokes falling flat. Then it happened. Just as we were finishing dinner, Susan stood up and made an announcement. "I'm so glad we're all here together," she said, raising her glass. "This year's dinner is especially important, as we'll be honoring a long-standing tradition. Ben, why don't you say a few words?" I knew what was coming. Ben always made a speech, something heartfelt and endearing. He would speak about family, about love, about how grateful he was for everyone in the room. It had become a part of the tradition, and I expected nothing less. But when Ben stood up, he didn't follow the usual script. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice steady but somehow tense. "You all know how much family means to me. It's everything I've worked for, everything I've strived for, and I'm thankful for each of you for being here, for being a part of my life." At first, it seemed normal. Then he took a deep breath and turned to face me. "And I want to say something about someone special who's in the room tonight. Emma, I'm so glad you're here with me. I know it hasn't been easy for you, adjusting to everything, to all of us. But you're part of this family now. You've always been part of this family." The room was silent. I smiled at him, thankful for the kindness in his words. But then, just as I was about to relax, Ben's words took a turn that made my stomach drop. "I know it's not easy to find your place when everyone already has their roles," he continued, still looking at me. "And I'm proud of how far you've come, how much you've grown in our family. But I think we all know that." He paused, glancing at his family before continuing. "Sometimes it feels like some of us just fit in better than others, doesn't it?" The words didn't make sense at first. My heart started racing. I looked around the room at the faces of his family members, trying to gauge what was happening, but everyone was either looking at their plates or avoiding eye contact with me. I wanted to speak, to say something to stop this, but my voice failed me. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, and I couldn't breathe. Ben smiled at me, a sad, almost pitying smile, and then turned back to the family. You know, some of us just click, and some of us don't. That's just how it is. I think you all know who the better fit is in this family. Some of us belong in the shadows. My head spun. The words felt like they were smacking me across the face, one after the other. I couldn't understand what was happening, couldn't comprehend what was being said, but it didn't matter. I was suffocating in this room, drowning in the humiliation. My heart felt like it was in my throat, and for the first time, I understood what it was like to be invisible. I glanced at my sister, Anna. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't even acknowledging my presence. She was laughing, playing along with the joke, as if the entire conversation had been some sort of shared family humor that I wasn't in on. And then it hit me. The words Ben had just spoken weren't just directed at me. They were directed at me through his family, using me as the punchline of a joke I hadn't agreed to be a part of. It wasn't just the toast, it was the entire dynamic. It wasn't just about me fitting into the family, it was about me failing to meet their expectations, to live up to their standards. Ben's family had never really seen me as their own. They had tolerated me, and I had tried so hard to fit in, to be accepted, to be seen as more than just Ben's girlfriend. And now Ben had made it clear. I wasn't enough. I didn't belong here. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there frozen, my mouth dry, feeling as though I had no escape. The people around me, my family-in-law, the ones I had once thought I could call my own, were now nothing but strangers. And in that moment, I realized something painful. I had never really been part of this family. And so, in the middle of the silence, I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm going to go." Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own footsteps, each one echoing in the empty hallway. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that room. I couldn't look at Ben. I couldn't look at his family. I couldn't stay in a place that made me feel small. I found myself sitting in my car, the engine running, parked on the side of the street. I didn't know how long I'd been there. Maybe it was an hour, maybe more. I didn't want to go home, didn't want to face Ben, didn't want to be anywhere near his family. I felt like I was suffocating, like the walls of my world were closing in on me. I had never felt so alone. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that Ben had said those things in front of everyone, or the fact that I had let it happen. I had allowed myself to be treated like this. I had allowed myself to believe that I was enough. But now I realized I would never be enough for them. And for the first time, I wondered if Ben had always known that. I sat there in my car, the engine humming quietly as the evening sky darkened around me. My mind was racing, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions that had suddenly come crashing over me. I couldn't even begin to process what had just happened at the dinner. The silence that followed Ben's words, the looks from his family, the way they had all collectively just stood there as if I were invisible, it was all too much. It wasn't just what Ben had said, it was the way he had said it, the way he had meant it. It hit me hard, harder than I ever thought it would. And for the first time in my life, I questioned my worth. I questioned everything I had believed about myself, about the love I thought we shared, about the family I thought I had become part of. I stayed in the car for what felt like hours. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. An epiphany? A wave of clarity? Maybe, just maybe, I was hoping I could come to terms with what had happened and find a way to go back inside and smile through the pain. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. The damage had been done. The trust I had placed in Ben, in his family, had been shattered. I thought about the man I had fallen in love with. Ben, the one I had shared my dreams with, the one I had thought would be by my side forever. How could he say those things? How could he publicly tear me down, in front of everyone, just to make a point about how much better his sister was? And the worst part? How could I have ignored the signs for so long? How had I not seen it coming? I felt the sting of the betrayal deep in my chest. It wasn't just about the toast. It was everything that led up to it. It was the subtle, hurtful comments over the years, the constant comparisons between me and Emily, the feeling that no matter how much I tried, I could never quite measure up to the perfect image of his family. But I had tried so hard. I had been patient, kind, loving. I had given everything I had to this family, and yet here I was, feeling like the outsider I always was. I had been used, and for what? So Ben could gain favor with his family at my expense? So he could feel like he finally belonged in the same world his sister did? I wasn't sure how long I sat there, but eventually I knew I had to face the reality of the situation. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I had to go back inside. I had to face Ben and confront him about what had just happened, even though I didn't know how I was going to do it. When I walked back into the house, the party had continued without me. It was as if I had never left. The conversations were louder now, more boisterous, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. But it was all just noise. I didn't care about the jokes or the laughter anymore. All I could hear in my head were Ben's words, and all I could feel was the coldness of his family, like they were all in on some joke that I wasn't a part of. I spotted Ben across the room, standing with his father Greg, who had his arm around him in that way fathers do when they're proud of their sons. It was so casual, so natural. Ben didn't even look up when I walked in. He was laughing, telling some joke to Greg, and I felt the hot rush of tears in my eyes again. I had never felt so alone, so utterly invisible. I stood there, trying to steady my breath, trying to calm myself down. I didn't want to make a scene, but the way Ben was acting made me feel like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been humiliated in front of everyone. It was like the apology I so desperately needed hadn't even occurred to him. I walked over to him, my heart pounding. The closer I got, the more I realized how much I wanted to confront him. I needed him to see how much he had hurt me. I needed him to understand the weight of his actions. "Ben," I said, my voice shaking but firm. He turned to me, still smiling, as if everything were normal. "Hey, babe. Where'd you go?" Everyone was wondering. "Don't," I interrupted, my voice cold. "Don't pretend like everything's fine. Not after what you said. Not after what you did." His smile faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the toast," I said, my voice rising, despite my best efforts to stay calm. "How could you say that to me, in front of everyone? How could you humiliate me like that, Ben?" His expression shifted, and for the first time that evening, I saw guilt flicker in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced with defensiveness. "I didn't mean it like that, Emma. You have to understand, it's just that no," I said, cutting him off. "Don't try to explain it away. Don't tell me it was a mistake. I don't want to hear that. You knew what you were doing. You knew exactly what you were saying." "I didn't know it would hurt you this much," he said, his voice softening. "I'm sorry. I swear I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you thought what?" I asked, incredulous. "That making me the butt of the joke would bring us closer? That calling me the lesser child in front of your entire family would somehow make things better? You humiliated me, Ben. You made me feel small, and I don't think I can ever get over that." The anger that had been bubbling inside me finally erupted. I couldn't keep it in any longer. "You've spent years making me feel like I'm not good enough for your family, like I'm not as perfect as Emily, like I'll never measure up to the standards you've set. And now, this? You're saying I'm the lesser child? You've ruined our wedding, Ben. You've ruined everything." Ben's face fell, and for a brief moment I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I never wanted to make you feel that way," he said quietly. "I swear I love you. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. It was stupid, and I didn't mean to hurt you." "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you again." He reached for me, but I pulled away, not ready to let him touch me, not ready to feel anything but the anger and betrayal that consumed me. I needed space. I needed time to think. "No, Ben," I said, my voice breaking. Just leave me alone. I can't do this right now." I turned away from him, not waiting for a response. I couldn't stand to look at him anymore. I couldn't stand to hear his voice. All I could hear in my head were the words he had said earlier, the words that had cut me so deep. My heart was shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I went outside into the cold night air, hoping the chill would help calm the fire that had been burning inside me all night. But nothing could cool it. Nothing could make it stop. The damage was done. As I stood there in the dark, alone with my thoughts, I realized something. This wasn't just about the toast. This wasn't just about my dad's words or the humiliation I had felt in front of everyone. It was about something much deeper. It was about the fact that Ben had never truly understood me, never truly seen me for who I was. It was about the realization that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the lesser one in his eyes, and I wasn't sure if I could ever accept that. I stood there in the darkness, tears streaming down my face, wondering if this was the end. Could I really continue a life with someone who didn't see me as an equal, someone who would humiliate me in front of his family for the sake of a joke? Could I ever forgive him? Or had this been the moment that broke everything?